Good afternoon, grade 12s. We are joining you again for telematics to discuss English home language. My name is Matthew, and this is Sarah. And good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And today we are going to be talking about paper 1. We are going to be working our way through paper 1, paper 2, and paper 3 in 3 separate sessions. Today we're going to talk about the 70-mark paper 1, and we're going to discuss specifically section A, which is a comprehension, and I'll be dealing with that. And then Sarah's going to talk about visual literacy and advertising, and we're going to spend our time getting into that. We're not going to talk about section B, which is the summary, but we hope that what we do talk about today will be helpful to you in your preparation for the paper 1. And that's the first point that I'd like to make today. English paper 1 is a paper for which you can prepare. We know that traditionally in subjects like history or life sciences, biology, geography, there's a lot of content that you can learn. There's pages and pages of notes that you can go through and get ready for your exam. And often English, and particularly the paper 1, the language paper, you might say things like, I can't study for this, or I can't prepare for this. As teachers, we would like to say that you can prepare for this paper. And so what we'd like to do, first of all, is make the point that it is worth making time in your study timetable to prepare for English paper 1, and of course paper 2, and of course you can prepare for paper 3 as well. Our focus today is paper 1. So we know that you're all really excited about drawing up your study timetables, and you've got them ready, and they should be ready. And we know that you're going to take this whole holiday to study, and those of you taking holiday, and so we know that you're busy planning that. Can we encourage you? Put some time aside for the paper 1. We're going to talk about a few practical ways in which you can do that. I'm going to dive into section A, and I'm going to talk about the comprehension and talk about some techniques that you can keep in mind, and some things which I think will be helpful to you as you think about paper 1 and as you prepare. The goal is that when you sit down for that exam, when you have the paper put in front of you, that you're feeling as comfortable as you can about what's coming up, even though there's a lot in it that you haven't seen, that you feel, look, I've got my head into the right space. I've warmed up for this, so that it's not completely strange and it's not completely terrifying, which we know it can be. So we're hoping today will help you to just remain calm and keep your head about you. That's the first point, is you can prepare. Now, traditionally, one way of preparing for almost any subject is to find past papers. Now, for the English paper 1, there are a whole range of past papers that are available to you. You can find them on the Department of Basic Education website. I think you can find them on the Western Cape Education Department website too. And so make the point of going to find those. And with regards to section A in the paper 1, which is the comprehension section, this is particularly important, I think, and it can be of particular help to do past papers. And I want to explain to you why. As teachers, we're very fond of telling you that you need to read. I'm sure we're not the first people to tell you that you need to read, and read again, and read some more. When it comes to the comprehension, when it comes to paper 1, the kind of reading that's really going to prepare you for that paper 1 and for the comprehension section is of a particular kind. And let me explain it in this way. I've got a novel in my hand here. It's any old novel. It's a random novel. It's a very good one, but I could have chosen any novel. I could have chosen The Gatsby or Animal Farm. It's about 200 pages long. And you can see if you're taking this novel and you're reading it, you've got 200 pages to get through it. And what tends to happen when you read something of a length such as this here is that you can read through the novel and miss a lot of the details and the words and the sentences and the paragraphs. You can miss a lot of the small detail so long as you're getting the big detail about plot and character, so who's involved, what are they doing, where's it happening, and so on and so forth. So reading a long text like this, like a novel, is different to reading something that looks a bit like this over here. I'll put it up on the camera. You can see here, this is again a randomly selected article. It's called Hugs for Life, and you can see here it's probably in the region of about 400 to 500 words long. It's a shorter piece of writing, perhaps a bit longer than that. The difference between the novel and the shorter piece of writing is that when it comes to an article, and particularly when it comes to the kinds of articles that are chosen for the paper one, you need to pay very close attention to individual words and phrases and sentences and paragraphs in the article. So if we can have a look at the article again, if you're reading through this article quite closely, at some point I might say, I want you to focus on the first sentence in the third paragraph, which would be, just to give you an idea of where it would be, just to highlight it, there we go. That's the first sentence of the third paragraph. And that, in a comprehension, what we're asking you to do is to really focus very closely on that one aspect of the piece of writing, and to read it, and to reread it, and to read it again, and to try and look at it in as much detail as possible, which is different to reading your novel and moving through it perhaps a little bit quicker, because what really counts are what you're looking for is the plot and the character and so on. So a short piece of formal writing is really that kind of writing. If you're looking to read in preparation for paper one, it's short articles such as the one that I have in front of me. And even better than that, I suppose, would be to go to the past paper ones and to look at the types of writing that you get in those papers, because that will give you exactly the right idea of the kind of writing that you're going to encounter in your paper one. So that's the first piece of preparation that you can engage in, is to actually to go and read the kinds of pieces of writing that you'll find in your paper one, which are shorter, more formal pieces of writing. And you want to get used to reading. Let me give you two words. Closely when you read, okay, which means that you pay careful attention, and, well, I guess saying the same thing essentially, closely and carefully. Okay, so read it and read it again and look for individual words and phrases and so on. And I'm going to show you how that works in just a moment in a paper one. All right? The other thing that you can do to prepare is you want to familiarize yourself with the kinds of questions that you're going to be faced with in the comprehension in the section A of paper one. And in your telematics booklet, you'll see that where it says lesson 1, paper 1, comprehension and visual literacy, which is today's lesson, you'll see that there's some notes there that you can read through on your own. And I'm not going to go through them word for word, but I do want to use what's in front of you to talk about the kinds of questions that you're going to get, and to use it as an exercise to start familiarizing yourself with the questions. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at an extract in your booklet there. It's labeled Extract A on graffiti, and then we're going to look at 5 words that you encounter that recur quite regularly in the paper one. And then we're going to look at some questions, and that's going to take us hopefully in the region of about 15 minutes or so, and we're going to spend our time looking at that. So let's start off, and let's look at the extract that's in front of you, Extract A, graffiti. And what I would suggest is, before you actually launch into the questions, is make sure that you read the extract through at least once, just to get a sense of what's in it, so you can when you read the questions, you have more of an idea of what you're looking for. So here we go. I'm going to read it with you. Extract A and graffiti. Graffiti is something most of us see every day. It is all over walls and buildings downtown. But have you ever thought about graffiti? When you do think of graffiti, does your mind go to vandalism or art? Yes, there is plenty of graffiti that is rude and disrespectful, but it can be used for good. Like art, graffiti is a good way to express your true feelings. Graffiti is a form of self-expression and creativity. Graffiti artists who might be angry at something or someone take it out on the walls. But some people create graffiti with a hidden message or a purpose, to vent their feelings and to add a bit of color to everyone's life. Such graffiti is not disrespectful. Some people are actually paid to paint graffiti. For example, the so-called mural kings are actually paid for painting graffiti advertisements in subways and streets. So there's the extract, and we read through it before we do anything else. Now, let's look at 5 words that come up in the kinds of questions that you get on this sort of extract in paper 1. The first word is consider. When you are asked to consider something, quite simply, you are being directed or being told to focus on something. So for example, where it says, consider the first sentence of paragraph 1, what you're having to do is to go to paragraph 1, find the first sentence, and that's where you start when you're wanting to answer your question. That's where you have to look. Okay? That sentence. So when it says consider, it says focus on that. When I say to you, for example, consider the weather, or consider that show on television, I'm asking you to think about it and to give it your attention and to focus on it. So that's what consider, broadly speaking, that's what it means. And then we get to 3 words which have very similar meanings. Discuss, comment, and explain. Discuss, comment on, and explain. Now, you could say that they mean essentially the same thing. And what they are doing is they are saying, the question is asking you to do is to discuss or to spend some time writing about whatever it is you're being asked to consider. Okay? You want to show that you have thought through the thing that you're being asked to look at. So, for example, if it says discuss what the writer means in question 1, or in sentence 1 rather, it's an invitation. Grade 12s, think of it as it's not that what you're trying to do is just write down the least amount that you can. A question, when it says discuss or comment or explain, it's an invitation for you to show what you have thought about when you have read this sentence or that paragraph. Okay? It's an invitation for you to show that you have comprehended or understood something. So don't just try and get away with writing the bare minimum. This is a good point at which to talk about mark allocations. In a comprehension, you'll have questions ranging in mark allocations from 1 through to even 4 marks. Okay, and if you have a 1-mark question, your answer is going to be fairly brief. Often it's just they're looking for a word or to quote something. But if you've got a 2 or a 3-mark question, you really need to make sure that you're saying enough to get your 2 or 3 marks. One rule that you can follow, which could be helpful, is to make sure that you write about 1.5 lines per mark. Okay, it doesn't always work, and sometimes you need to write more, or sometimes you need to write less, obviously. But it's a good guide that if you have a 1-mark question, you write about 1.5 lines. If you've got a 2-mark question, write between 2 and 3 lines. If you have a 3-mark question, write between 4 and 5 lines. That's a very, very rough guide. But grade 12s, don't, for a 3-mark question, write 1 line and think that you're going to get your 3 marks, because 9 times out of 10 you won't. 95 times out of 100 you won't get your 3 marks. So make sure that you're writing enough. So when you're being asked to discuss or comment on or explain, take it as an invitation to give a good, thorough, intelligent answer. Think through it. Don't just try and do the bare minimum. Make sure that you use that opportunity. And then the last word that we're looking at is the word significant or significance. When you're asked why is something significant, you are essentially being asked, why does this matter? So you might be asked, for example, discuss the writer's use of the word us in a particular sentence. All right. So, for example, in the first sentence of paragraph 1, it says, graffiti is something most of us see every day. And you're asked, what is the significance of us? Here's a good tip. If you're being asked for the significance of something, ask yourself this question. What could be used instead of what is being used? So, why is us significant in the sentence? Well, replace it with me or you. So, graffiti is something I see every day. Graffiti is something most of you see every day. Why does the writer say most of us? Okay, and then you start to see why the writer has used that word and why it is significant. Okay. So there are 5 words that you're going to encounter, and that's just an introduction to what they mean. Again, go to the past papers and look at the kinds of questions that are asked. It'll be helpful. And then let's finish off by looking at some questions on this extract. We want to look at some specific questions that you could be asked in the paper 1. And these 4 questions use the words that I've just been talking about. And so we want to see what do they look like in practice and do it together. So let's start. Let's see how many questions we can get through in the time that we have. Question number 1. It says, consider the first sentence of the first paragraph. Stop right there, grade 12s. Find the first sentence of the first paragraph. And if you've got highlighters, if you've got, or take a pen or take a pencil, and in your question paper, that you're not going to, you're welcome to write on the question paper. Okay, it's your question paper. You know, what I think would be helpful is find that first sentence and highlight it or underline it. And so you're making sure that when you're answering the question, you are looking at what it is that you're being asked to consider. So consider means this: focus on it, give it your attention. So graffiti is something most of us see every day. That's the first sentence of the first paragraph. Now here comes the question. Why does the writer claim that most of her readers see graffiti every day? Okay, why does the writer claim that most of her readers see graffiti every day? Now, you're being asked to consider the first sentence of the first paragraph, but your answer is not just going to be in that first sentence. Here's another tip, and at this point I think I need to remind you, grade 12s, that you really should be making notes and taking down notes, and hopefully all of you are doing that already. But can I urge you, please, write down notes so that you don't forget this when you leave. Here's another point, here's another note that you can take down. You're looking at, when you refer to a specific sentence or a word, you want to do what's called, and I'm going to write something else here. There's another C word. In fact, let me write it on the same sheet so you've got them all together. We're talking C words today. You want to make sure that you're reading it in context. Okay, which means that when you take that sentence, what you want to do is read the sentence, but then read it in context, which means read the paragraph as well. Don't just read the sentence, but read the entire paragraph in which you find that sentence. That's the context, okay? Because the paragraph is talking about a certain idea, and that sentence is part of that idea. So why does the writer claim that most of her readers see graffiti every day? Let's read the rest of the paragraph and see if we can't find our answer there. It is all over walls and buildings downtown. But have you ever thought about graffiti? Okay, now the writer's asking another question. Let's just stop and let's just look at that second sentence. Can you see how we're reading carefully and closely? We're not just sort of reading and kind of skipping over. Let's take that second sentence and let's see if we can't answer that first question. Okay, why does the writer claim that most of her readers see graffiti every day? The second sentence says, it is all over walls and buildings downtown. Well, that gives us a clue. Where it says here, it is all over walls and buildings, there's a suggestion there as to why people would see it every day. Why would people see graffiti every day? Well, it's all over walls and buildings, but where specifically? Let's read carefully and let's read closely. It's all over walls and buildings downtown. Okay? And let's have a look in this first sentence. She says graffiti is something most of us see every day. Now, we start asking the questions. Why would her readers see graffiti on walls and buildings downtown every day? Well, probably because they go downtown or through downtown every day. Okay, she said you see it every day, and she's just explained where you would see it, on walls and buildings downtown. So your answer then would be something along the lines of, the writer claims that most of her readers would see graffiti every day because there is a lot of graffiti in the area downtown, and her readers probably travel through there or to there every day. So why do they see it every day? Because it's downtown, and that's where they go every day. Okay, and so what we've done is we've considered the first sentence, but then we've read further and we've looked at specific words and phrases. Can you see how important it is to read carefully and to read closely? Okay, and so that's what consider means, is look very carefully and closely. Let's have a look at one more, and let's go to question 4, where it says explain the significance of the writer's reference to the mural kings. Okay, and there are two of the words that we've talked about: explain and significance. Okay, Explain the significance of the writer's reference to the mural kings. So let's go find the writer's reference to the mural kings before we do anything else, because that's what we have to look at before we can answer the question. So we read through again, and we find it's over here in the last sentence of the second paragraph. Okay? The sentence reads, for example, the so-called mural kings are actually paid for painting graffiti advertisements in subways and streets. There's the sentence, but we need to read it in context. So what do? We go back and we reread the paragraph. Let's just pause there for a moment. You might be saying, sure, this is a lot of work. Okay, I just want to look at one sentence. Why am I looking at the paragraph and rereading? It's so important that you take your time to read closely and carefully, because that's what this requires of you. Okay, and think about it this way. If you have an axe and you're trying to chop down a tree, but your axe is blunt, and you take some time to sharpen your axe, when you come back to chopping that tree, it's going to go a lot quicker and you're going to be a lot more effective. That's kind of what you're doing here, is you're saying, I need to read and reread, and when you do that, you're just sharpening your axe a bit. You're getting more and more familiar with and used to, and seeing more and more of the details in the reading, so that when you answer the question, you're not just having to suck it out your thumb, you're looking at the details and you're drawing it out of the reading. So it is worth taking the time to read it as much as possible. And you might think that this is getting a bit boring. I think it's going to help you. So let's just read that paragraph and let's see if we can answer this question in the last few minutes we have of looking at section A. So the second paragraph says this: graffiti is a form of self-expression and creativity. Graffiti artists who might be angry at something or someone take it out on the walls. But some people create graffiti with a hidden message or a purpose, to vent their feelings and to add a bit of color to everyone's life. Such graffiti is not disrespectful. Some people are actually paid to paint graffiti. For example, the so-called mural kings are actually paid for painting graffiti advertisements in subways and streets. So we're asked to explain the significance of the reference to the mural kings. Well, who are the mural kings? They are people, and here we go, it's explained in the sentence before, who are actually paid to paint graffiti. Okay? So that's the first significance. They are, and have a look here, in the same sentence, they are an example of people who are paid to paint graffiti. Now that's at least part of your answer, but have a look here, 3 marks. I haven't answered the full question. Okay, I'm on my way to answering it. Okay, because I've explained that they are an example of people who are actually paid to paint graffiti, and it says here in the sentence as well. So the significance of the reference to the mural kings is because they give it an example of what the writer is talking about. But what is the writer? For 3 marks, we've got to go deeper. We've got to push harder. We've got to scratch our heads and think a little bit more thoroughly about this. And so you go back and you look at, what is this paragraph about? What is that second paragraph about? Okay? It's about the fact that graffiti is a form of self-expression and creativity. It's talking about the fact that graffiti artists might be angry at something, but it might have a hidden message or a purpose. It might add a bit of color to everyone's life. And so what the writer is trying to do is say, look, there is graffiti that's not disrespectful, but is actually positive. And in fact, some graffiti is so positive that people can actually get paid to do it. And so now we're looking at writing a good 3-mark answer, where we're not just referring, okay, we're considering that sentence, but we're not just referring to that, we're showing that we can read it in context. And so our answer would look something like, well, the mural kings are significant because they're an example of people who are paid to do graffiti. And why would people be paid to do graffiti? Well, because not all graffiti is negative. The mural kings paint positive graffiti or carry out positive graffiti. And that's a point that the writer is trying to make, that graffiti can be positive. And there we go. Now we're starting to give a good round 3-mark answer, but it does require you to read carefully, to read closely, to look at your answer in context, to scratch your head and to kind of take another look at it and give the best answer that you can. Take your time. Work through the question slowly. Work through the details of the question. And that, grade 12s, is why, it is helpful to go and to do paper 1 practice, because you get used to working through these types of questions carefully, closely, a bit slower. But by the time, if you work this into your study timetable and you work through a number of paper ones, and particularly the comprehensions, by the time that you hit your actual exam, hopefully you've gotten quicker at it, you've gotten better at it, you've become more comfortable at it. And so that's why we would say that you need to prepare, and you can prepare for Section A.
Yes, you can definitely prepare. I could not say that enough. Grade 12s, it's really important. And I'm quite lucky because now I get to look at what I think is quite the fun part of paper one, because it's something that we look at every day, and that's the advertising and the visual literacy. So thank you very much, Matthew. I hope that you have all taken good notes about those comprehension tips. So today I'm going to be looking at Section C. Remember, we said at the beginning we're not going to look at Section B, which is summary work, which is 10 marks. Now, Section C is always 30 marks, but I'm only going to be looking at 20 of those marks. So your Section C is normally advertising, visual literacy, generally in the form of cartoons, sometimes photographs, and then the last 10 marks is editing. Now, grade 12s, for editing, I cannot replace good old-fashioned study, editing your own essays, and just reading a lot to see what good grammar is in practice. That editing section is purely up to you, and it is really a place where you can score at least 7 out of 10. So I encourage you to do that in your study time. But I'm going to go back now to advertising. And advertising to me is just the most fun, because we're surrounded by advertising. We watch adverts on TV, we see them in the magazines we read, and a lot of them are really good. There's some really bad ads out there, but I'm not going to talk about those ones. So the first slide that I've prepared for you, is just a little cheat sheet, and I think you can write this down, of what to look at when you're faced with an advert for the first time. So, firstly, you should look at the text. And in looking at the text, it's important you look at figures of speech, emotive language. Then you need to look at the image and figure out for yourself, how does that link to the text? I am going to go back to each of these points just now, so if you are a little bit lost, don't stress just yet. Also, when looking at the image, think about the colors. Colors are so important, and they have a lot of meaning to us. Maybe that doesn't come through in your exam because you get a black and white sheet, but you can definitely see if things are bright or if they're very dark. And then the last, and I think most important, is intention. What is this advert trying to do? And for that, you need to think about its audience or target market, and then its intention, as in, does it want you to go buy something, or does it want you to donate money? Okay, so let's start with the text. Figures of speech are also something you can all learn. You've got puns, idioms, similes, metaphors. All of those are things that you can use, and you can definitely study them. And of course, your reading will help you be able to pick them up more and more. Then there's emotive language. Now, I would really like you to make some notes on this, because emotive language is quite a broad topic, but it's very important. Emotive clearly comes from the word emotion. So emotive language is any language that stirs an emotion or a reaction or a particular feeling within you, the reader. For example, if I see an advert for food and it says, fresh fruit. Oh, that word fresh, it just makes me want to bite into that apple. It didn't just say, buy fruit, buy fresh fruit. So we would say that fresh in that context is an emotive word. It's got a really positive connotation. Now, if you are confused with any of the vocabulary that either Matthew or I have been using now, please text it through to us and let us know so we can explain the words. But connotation is the feeling associated with a word. So fresh is clearly a positive word, whereas rotten would clearly be negative. So that's one part of emotive language. Another part of emotive language that generally comes up in advertising are superlatives. Now, hopefully you remember what a superlative is from way back in grade 8, and that's in your steps of comparison. And your superlative is the top, the best, anything ending in EST. So this is the most beautiful ring you could buy. These are the best vegetables on offer. We have the lowest prices. All of those words make us think, oh, this is the best. We can't get anything better here. Anywhere else, excuse me. And then, of course, we need to look at pronouns. Now remember, pronouns are words such as I, you, me, us. Matthew was actually talking about them a bit earlier. And pronouns are important because how often have you watched an advert and they say, are you sick of scrubbing this pan? And you think, oh, they're talking to me. Yes, I am sick of scrubbing my pans. That's why I need the Bauer pan or whatever they are advertising. And that you is a powerful word. It's an emotive word because it makes the viewer think, oh, they're talking directly to me. And it pulls you into that advert. Okay, so I hope you've made some notes on the kind of language we're going to be looking at. Then we need to look at the image. And I'm sure you all know the saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And that is the thing with advertising. You'll notice modern advertising has far less writing than advertising from the 1950s, if you've ever seen something. Because the image is very powerful. But if we go back to my slide, you'll see that what we're looking at in the image is the links to the text. And that is the key here. The key is my image backing up what my text is saying, or is it completely removed? For example, let's look at my next slide. Here we have a Just Juice advert. And clearly we have an image of an orange wearing a mask. And the slogan at the bottom says, it's fruit in disguise. Now, in case you're not aware, Just Juice is a fizzy juice cool drink. So it's saying, oh, you're getting all your fruit, all the goodness of fruit, but it's disguised as a delicious drink. Now, if we look at that image again, we can clearly see that that is a literal interpretation of the slogan. That orange is literally wearing a mask, which is disguising it. Now, of course, that's not what you get when you buy Just Juice, but that is how our image is linking to the text, to the slogan, it's fruit in disguise. So that's very important to look for. And of course, because we can look at the color in this one, and I think it's quite fun, so it's nice to look at the color. We've got this beautiful bright orange background, which of course matches with the orange, but also how does it make you feel, grade 12s? It doesn't make you feel depressed, it makes you feel happy, and you want to look up, go and buy some Just Juice because it feels energizing. I know it sounds far-fetched, but this is what advertisers are doing to you. Right, so let's go back to our slide and we will see now the last thing we need to look at is intention. What I mean by intention, excuse me, I'm going to go back. What I mean by intention is what is that advert trying to do? So firstly, who is it speaking to? And secondly, why is it speaking to them? So let's think of something we're all familiar with. For example, washing powder. Now, while many of us do our own laundry at home, whether we live with parents or not, 9 times out of 10, it is probably a female figure in your household that is doing the laundry. And 9 times out of 10, it is some kind of caregiver, whether that is your mother, a grandmother, an aunt, or a domestic worker. So any kind of advert about washing powder is probably targeted towards that group because they are the most likely to buy it. Just as a Justin Bieber CD would certainly not be targeted at a 50-year-old, though they still might like it. Okay, so that's what I mean when I say target market. When you are answering questions about target market, you need to be very particular. You can't just say, oh men, oh women, oh teenagers. Because not all men and women are the same, and not all teenagers are the same. Not all men and women have the same amount of money. So a Lexus advert is certainly not going to be aimed at the same people as, I'm not sure, perhaps a Mazda advert. They've got different target audiences. Okay. And then now we need to say, why are we talking to them? What's the intention of talking to them? Do we want them to buy something? Do we want them to give money to a particular cause? Do we want them to enter a competition? So those are all important in how someone puts together an advertisement. All right, so let's look back at our Just Juice ad. Now, it's fruit in disguise. I want you to take a minute at home, well, in the classroom, and maybe discuss this with your partner. For 30 seconds, who do you think this is aimed at? Who is the target market of this advertisement? Excuse me. Okay, time's up. Now, most grown-ups probably don't want to disguise their fruit and vegetables. So this, because it says fruit in disguise, is probably aimed at an age group that is not particularly happy with eating fruit. Who's that? Probably younger children. But I hear you say, can all younger children go out and buy their own fruit juice? Maybe not. So we could say that this advert is targeted at either young adults or teenagers or mothers of teenagers and young children. Because a mother would be excited, oh, look, I can get my child to drink fruit juice. But it's in disguise, so they won't know that they're getting the vitamins of fruit. Okay. I obviously don't have much faith in young children eating fruit. I hope you all do. Anyway, let's look at the text. What I've done on the side of this slide is that you can see that tiny text at the bottom. I've typed it out for you, which they should do in your exams. It says, with no added sugar or preservatives, a glass of juice is the perfect way to get your 5 a day, one of your 5 a day. www.justjuice.co.nz. This is an advert from New Zealand. Now we've got a superlative there, and perfect is it. Now I know perfect doesn't end in EST, but you can't have perfect, more perfect, perfectest. It is a superlative on its own. And so there we've got an emotive word. And we've got lots of little facts that are going to keep mums happy. No added sugar or preservatives. Okay, let's move on to the next ad, because otherwise we're going to run out of time, and I've got another really good one to show you. You'll find in your exam that often the advertisements are not necessarily aimed to make you buy something. The way our exams are tending to go is to look at adverts that are trying to raise awareness for certain topics. Either HIV/AIDS awareness, environmental awareness, perhaps saving electricity, those kinds of things you'll often get in an exam. So this one I have is quite interesting. It's a WWF advert, which is the World Wildlife Fund. And it's incredibly simple, but it's very, very powerful. Right, so if we look at the text, what on earth are we doing to our planet? I hope that you've all spotted the pronoun that's very important. We. Now, think of a question you might get is something such as, why is it significant that the advertiser has used we? And because grade 12's we is a first person plural pronoun, it's including the reader. The reader is also the person making that poor polar bear cry. The reader is also the person involved in destroying the planet. And that's very powerful, very emotive, because it arouses feelings of guilt, sadness, and a call to action to stop damaging the planet within the reader. So that's very important. Also, you might have noticed that there's almost a pun there. What on earth are we doing to our planet? Well, we're on planet Earth. So that's a little trick there they've used. And of course, the image here is very important because we have a polar bear covering his eyes. Now, polar bears probably aren't very emotional and don't cover their eyes as humans do. But what emotion does that convey? Sadness, because we cover our eyes when we cry. So it's an effective image linking with that text because it's saying the polar bear is so upset because of what we are doing to our planet. Okay. I hope that's given you a little bit of insight. What I would do if I were you, take any adverts. Maybe you have some magazines lying at home or a newspaper, or maybe you watch a little bit too much TV. Take any advert, maybe your favorite, and try and analyze it yourself in terms of text, image, and intention. It's a very good exercise, and it's actually quite fun. And for those of you who might have a future in marketing, it would certainly help you. Right, now we need to move on to the next 10 marks, which is the visual literacy section. Now, visual literacy, as I've said, it can refer to photographs, but generally it refers to cartoons that we see. Now, in cartoons, you need to look at exactly the same things as in advertising. You need to look at text, you need to look at the image, and you need to look at the intention. What is the cartoonist trying to do? Generally, it's to make you laugh, but how are they trying to make you laugh? In your book that we've given you, you've got 2 pages, page 6 and page 7. And these are just guidelines on what to look out for in either cartoons or in photographs. So I hope that you can use that as a study tool because they're quite nice notes. But we're going to look at some quite funny cartoons. Well, I hope you agree with me. And the first one is our friend Justin Bieber. So that's supposed to be Justin Bieber on the side, and it's 2 men holding out a newspaper that says, Bieber concert takings robbed. And at the bottom is a subtitle, How They Get His Hair Like That. Now, grade 12s, I don't know how many of you know that news story, that when Justin Bieber played in Cape Town, there were profits stolen from the Cape Town Stadium. And that brings me to a very important point. In the months leading up to your final exam, you need to keep up to date with the news and current affairs and what is going on in our country, particularly our country, but also the rest of the world. Because examiners just love to use a current new cartoon or an article about something that's been big in the news. And while they cannot ask you about your outside knowledge, it will really help you to have that background knowledge so you feel comfortable when you get that comprehension test or that cartoon that you think, oh, I know exactly what they're talking about and I feel happy now. So this was a story where Justin Bieber's concert, not himself, but the concert was robbed. Now let's look at that cartoon. This is by our very famous, very own Zapiro. Now Zapiro uses a technique called caricature, which is very important. And it means that he's exaggerated people's faces. So you can see, obviously, Justin Bieber's hair has been exaggerated somewhat. Now you need to look at all the visual clues. For example, it says how they get his hair like that, and there's two men with sunglasses. And I can tell that one of them must be his hairstylist because he's holding a hairdryer. So that's an example of a visual clue that Zapiro has dropped in there so that we can understand what's going on. The other thing is, how do we know that Justin Bieber's got a fright? Well, A, his hair is standing on end, but B, his hands are up in the air, his eyes are wide open, his mouth is dropped open, and there are even lines around his hair saying that it sprung up suddenly. So those are all examples of little visual clues that you need to look for. Another thing I just want to draw your attention to is this is a form of satire. Satire is a special kind of humor, and satire makes fun of generally very serious topics, but it's so that the public, while laughing at those serious topics, actually has to think about it. And in this cartoon, it was quite shocking, in fact, that the Cape Town Stadium could so easily be robbed after a massive concert. And so Zapiro is drawing our attention to the serious event while also making fun of someone like Justin Bieber at the same time. So it's quite effective in getting the public to think about current events. All right. I have another cartoon, which is one of our favorites, of course, Madam and Eve. And I've typed out the text for you at the bottom. So there's Eve. "I'm sorry, madam, but you can't go in the kitchen. I just washed the floor." And madam says, "But I need my tea." "Okay, you can go, but it'll cost you $10. So madam says, "Okay, here." "Wait a minute, $10? What for?" And Eve says, "Eve told." Now, this is also a form of satire because we're making fun of something that has been in the news over and over again for the past few months, and those are the e-tolls. So if you know about that, then you'll be on top of things to answer questions in this advert. In this cartoon. But the important thing is you need to look at the pictures. Eve is clearly stopping madam. She's got her hand out in front of her. Madam is clearly shocked. Her eyes are open, wide, her mouth is very small. But then if we look at the last frame, madam has changed. Now she's just unimpressed. And we can see because her eyes are half closed and her mouth is off down to the side. Whereas Eve is quite pleased with herself because she's smiling. Grade 12s, I really hope that you've been listening to how I've been looking at these, because you can't just say, "I can tell from her facial expression." Because you could almost give that answer for any question on a cartoon. You need to show that you understand how having an upturned face gives a smile, which means you are happy. And I know it sounds really silly and very pedantic, but it's important because remember, when you're being examined, you need to prove to the person marking your paper that you understand exactly what is in front of you. So when you approach all of these things, take Matthew's advice. Take the time to investigate carefully, closely, and in context what is in front of you. So whether it be an advert, a cartoon, your summary text, your comprehension text, you need to look carefully at those things and figure out as much as you can before you even read the questions. Because if you just dive headlong into those questions, you're going to get yourself all confused and riled up. It's better to take the time when it's in front of you to almost delve into it. See how much you can understand for yourself. Make notes, scribble all over it, and see how much you can get. And then you might find when you get to the questions, it's a breeze because you've already done all of this work for yourself.
I think the one thing to keep in mind is that the Zapiro comic and the Madam and Eve comic weren't drawn for exams. They were drawn to make people laugh.
Yes.
They were drawn for a newspaper. So they didn't sit down and think, oh, this is going to be in a paper one, I better make it good. So what you're wanting to do is, precisely as Sarah said, is you want to read the cartoon, look at the cartoon, and just the point of these cartoons, and Sarah made the point earlier, is that there's a punchline, there's a joke in there somewhere. And if you read it and you don't laugh in some way, I mean, and you don't have to think it's a very good joke, but you need to, if you're not laughing, then perhaps you need to go back and read the cartoon again and read it until you go, oh, okay, because then you know you've got what the cartoonist is trying to get at. If you go straight into the questions without having that moment, I'd say that you're going to struggle because you want to make sure that you're getting the joke. And just, if I can quickly, just one detail which I think is helpful to keep in mind, and I'm just going to draw a very simple diagram here, just to talk about eyes for a moment, and you'll see this in the cartoon. In a cartoon, when particularly a full-frame cartoon like Madam and Eve, eyes are very important, and eyes can be drawn in a number of different ways. So over here, you've got a sort of half-closed eye, which if you have a look at the final frame in the Madam and Eve cartoon, both Madam and Eve have their eyes half-closed, and in fact, Eve has her eyes half-closed the whole way through. And that's indicating a fairly sort of neutral sort of emotion. Eve is not excited, she's not particularly upset, she's just, kind of working out her plan. And in the end, when she's looking straight at the audience, and this is another point to bear in mind, whenever a character in a cartoon looks straight at the viewer or the audience, they're trying to share the joke with you. And so, if you're looking for the punchline, if you're looking for the joke, it's in that fourth frame. And often it's when you've got a character looking at you. And so you can see Madam as well in the fourth frame there. She's also got her eyes half closed, looking straight at you. And it's almost as if it's your cue to go, oh, ha, ha. And so the sort of half closed eyes going, oh. And Madam can't believe that she's been the butt of this, this joke, and Eve's quite pleased with herself. And you'll see Madam's eyes in the first three frames are, and if you have a look at the diagram that I've drawn here, it's very simple. There's the eye, and it's wide open, and her eyes the whole way through are open because she's experiencing some surprise or shock or some emotion. As soon as the eyes are sort of half closed, the emotion's a lot more neutral. The person's a bit calmer, and so that's just a small detail. But that's why it's so important. When you answer the question, don't just say the facial expression. You need to be specific. Say, Eve is looking straight at the viewer with her eyes half closed, and she has a grin on her face. You want to be that specific.
So grade 12, we've actually given you some great tips, and we've given you permission to go out and read the newspaper, read cartoons, though not only cartoons, and look at adverts.
Yeah.
Which is quite a fun way that you could prepare for your exam. Rather than just studying lists of things, go out and look at real texts. Because all the things that you're going to get in your exam were not, as Matthew said, written for the exam. They're real, working, live texts. They've appeared in a newspaper. They've appeared on billboards. And that really is the best part about English, is that it's just alive all around you.
And I think it's also important to know, in terms of your confidence, that you know how to read pictures. Okay, so you'll look at the Madam and Eve, and you'll look through it, and I'm sure you would have gone, oh, okay, ha ha. As long as you know the reference to the Eve toll. But if you look at advertisements, you understand them, you get them. So what we're saying to you now is not necessarily like how do you understand the advertisement, but how do you talk about it? How do you express your understanding? And that's what you have to keep in mind with the paper one, with all of the papers really, is, how do you show that you understand something? And remember, it's an open invitation to show that you get something. And you've got to know how to talk about it, and you've got to be prepared to show that thoroughly and take some time doing that. And don't just throw in a one-sentence answer to a 2 or 3 mark question, because you're not going to get your marks. So that's that's us for today, and we hope that it's been helpful, and we hope that you feel a bit more equipped and a bit more, you've got some tools in your toolbox for the paper one. And can we urge you again, schedule in some time into your study timetable to prepare for this exam, and look for those instances of where it's at work in the world around you. And we wish you all of the best in your preparation.
Yes, good luck, grade 12s. We'll see you again for paper 2.